Welcome. We invite you to just, kind of like probably if you're way too far, maybe make your way over here. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, minors and friends of UTEP, welcome to our second edition of the Minor Entrepreneurship Talks. This is an initiative by the Mike Loya Center for Innovation and Commerce, showcasing and highlighting stories of UTEP alumni, faculty, staff, student entrepreneurs, picking up successes along the way. My name is Fernanda Fiscal. I'm the director of the Mike Loya Center and your host for today. Today we have a distinguished guest, a two-time graduate of the UTEP College of Business, a former assistant vice president for the advancement operations at UTEP, and an outstanding female founder and innovative mind behind FundMiner. Please join me in welcoming Chelsea. Thank you, Chelsea, for coming. How are you today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and share my story with you all. So doing well, thank you.
Well, just for everyone to know your story, who you are, would you like to share with our audience, a little bit of your background, about yourself and FundMiner?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, where to begin? Well, I grew up in El Paso, so I moved here when I was 5. I come from a family of immigrants, different story from maybe some of you in the Paso del Norte region, but nonetheless did migrate my way here with my family. My parents are from Portugal, so my father did not go to school past the 4th grade. My mother did go to nursing school, but I was really excited to be sort of the first generation true college student, as the nursing program my mom attended at the time was more of a certificate. And so that was something that was really special. But growing up in El Paso, I don't know if you all, if this was something that you experienced too, but in high school, all of my friends went off to college. And I was sort of, I wanted to so bad, and even applied to schools and knew I had no way or idea of how I would possibly pay for any of that or accomplish that. And so when it kind of came down to it, I mean, I had no doubt that I was going to go to college, and UTEP was really just my only option. I mean, my parents had always been super supportive and amazing, but they didn't help me to do any college applications or figure out financial aid, and they hadn't saved any money to help me either. So UTEP at the end of the day was my best option, and I'm super happy that I did that. But at the time, it was kind of a sad thing for me. Like, it was just all my friends were going off to U of A and UT Austin and all these exciting places, and they were going to be away from their parents and be having fun and, being in sororities and fraternities and all those things. And, I made the decision, or had to make the decision to stay here. And at the time, I remember feeling a little bummed about it, or like I was missing out. But then over the years, all of my friends started moving back to El Paso, and they were sort of starting from scratch here. And in the meantime, I had gone to school and worked my entire time throughout undergrad and grad school, and I had made amazing connections throughout the city. And I had been working really hard and sort of proven myself within a lot of community members as a hard worker. And so I had a lot of, or a great network behind me. And so it was really interesting that what ended up happening is all of my friends moved back to El Paso, and I was suddenly the one that was ahead, because I had stayed here and, put pen to paper and just been working and networking, and they were all off kind of like partying and doing other things. And not to say that everybody who goes off to college does that, but they did all end up back here, and they sort of said like, well, I don't know anybody here now. How do you know all these people? And so that was something that was like a very big, interesting shift for me. Was at the end of the day, like I felt like I actually ended up ahead. I didn't have a huge student loan debt that I, am still paying off. I was able to work my way through college, pay a little at a time, take out some money in loans, pay that over time. So I like to bring up that story because I'll never forget that like feeling in high school of feeling like I was missing out, and I'll also never forget when all of my friends moved back and I suddenly was the one that was super ahead. So it's a long way of getting to this answer, but gosh, where to go from there? So I studied UTEP COBA for undergrad. My major was management, and I had a concentration in entrepreneurship, which was a fun program to be a part of. Then after college, I took a 6-month break and decided to go back to school to get my MBA. So I did the UTEP MBA program, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was the best thing ever. It was a very different experience for me than my undergrad program. In undergrad just wasn't able to be as involved, and you're with a lot of different people. And then in the MBA program, it was a small cohort and the same people throughout the 2 years. So I made some very close friends, and we did everything together. And we all got really involved together. At some point, I remember they said oh, we're looking for a new MBA association cabinet. And so our whole group rallied and made signs and all got voted as the MBA association leaders. And we made a website and made t-shirts and everything. That was fun. But then when I graduated with my MBA, at the time I was working for a small nonprofit. And it's really funny because I think back to also kind of high school days, and I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I really loved entrepreneurship. And I remember talking to a friend's mom who said, I could really see you running a nonprofit. And I was like, ugh, I'm going to business school. Excuse me. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And then I ended up working for a nonprofit. And that was great, but when I finished grad school, I realized that I was already the executive director of the nonprofit, and I had just worked really hard in grad school, and I wanted to keep building my career, but there wasn't really any more career building there. So I gave notice and ended up actually joining the board of trustees there, and I'm still involved today. But when I gave notice, one of the folks on the board was the vice president for advancement here at UTEP. So right after I graduated from UTEP, I ended up working at UTEP. And so at this point, I worked at UTEP for 5 years. I mean, I think I spent 14 years of my life at UTEP between undergrad and grad school and then working here. So I never thought I'd be a minor that many years of my life, but here I am today now with FundMiner. So it's kind of crazy how it all comes together, because I think back to this lady who told me, I see you running a nonprofit, and I was like, well, but I want to be a businesswoman, and now I have a business that sells software to nonprofits. So it's crazy that it all comes back together.
It always comes together. It's very exciting to hear, and this is very familiar to maybe with myself and with people that are here in this room. We start at UTEP with an undergrad, and then we continue doing our masters, and then we somehow continue our way in professional life here at the university, right? How do you see that as a benefit? Because when we are here, we sometimes look at it, oh, I should be doing something else, right? So from your perspective, you have a very unique perspective of looking at why, the importance or the benefits, right, of working in a university, a higher education institution like UTEP, and how we can leverage the learning to then propel the professional careers, so students and professionally.
I think that's why I really liked the MBA program, was it started to really get into the thick of the work I was interested in, and we were doing case studies. And I would say my favorite part was we got to do 2 projects with companies. And so there were different companies you were assigned to in groups, and I think ours was maybe the Hospitals of Providence or a different hospital, and Windstar, I believe, the gas company. And we got a real life project from them that they were working and going to use in their regular course of business. And so that was amazing real life experience, where we were then put in conference rooms with executives, and every time you're challenged to step up, you grow as a person and your capacity grows. And so I think the university environment, and whether that's as a student or working there, really affords you these different opportunities and challenges to grow and adapt, different experiences to be involved in. I mentioned the MBA Association, and one thing I remember doing for that is we created a speaker series. And so we invited industry, alumni, similar to this, to come and talk to the MBA program. And that, then we were talking to executives at companies. And again, this was experiences we didn't have before. And when I started working for UTEP early on, I got to fly to UT Austin and go to UT System and see their new fancy building and meet with people there and meet with this guy who worked for UTIMCO, which is UT System's investment management company. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. And so those are just experiences that I hadn't had before. And the UTEP environment afforded me the opportunity as a student and employee to have these different experiences that then made me feel more confident when I was doing them in my career and in other circumstances.
Right. It's great to hear, right? Because this is part of this conversation. We believe that UTEP specifically has a very unique power, right? But when we're here, we usually don't see it. So it's great to hear that, what we're experiencing in our everyday lives professionally, it's going to serve us wherever we go. So now, thank you for sharing that information. It's unbelievable what you've done, and I didn't know that you were your parents were from Portugal. That's amazing. So now let's talk a little bit more about you and your role as CEO and co-founder of the FundMiner. So it sounds fancy. It's like, I'm the CEO and the co-founder, but what does that mean? What are your everyday activities? What do you actually do for the business to make it grow? So would you give us a little bit more insight on that?
Yeah, of course. So fortunately, I have a great co-founder. His name is Alejandro, and he's also from El Paso. He's our chief of product and technology, and so I can't imagine being a solo founder, and these exist, but I just can't imagine not having a partner to turn to when I need ideas or someone to review something or just to be there with you through the thick and thin of things. So because there's two of us, we sort of have things split into like the back of the house and the front of the house. And so he handles all things technology, engineering, product, security, infrastructure, generally. And then I tend to handle the front of house things, so sales and marketing are the two big items, but then there's also the running of the business, which is budget, finance, HR, legal, all of the other things. And so we tend to those are sort of primarily how we're split, but I will also say that Alejandro is commonly in sales meetings with me, reviewing marketing material. I'm constantly giving him feedback and ideas on product. So we work pretty closely together. But I would say at the end of the day, what does it mean? Ultimately, you're the one responsible for everything going right. And so it's making sure that everyone on your team is doing what they need to be doing, and that you have everything, for the company scheduled, or you can anticipate what's upcoming and plan your time, prioritize your time. And so it's sort of being willing to do whatever it takes to keep it all going.
Excellent. I mean, having a co-founder, this is part of, we realize the students are solopreneurs at the very beginning, right? And they realize, hey, I need a team to make this happen. So it's important to know, how to distribute that, the workload. So very interesting. So can you share with us, what is it? I know we have FundMiner in the background over here. But for those here in the audience who don't know what FundMiner is, would you like to explain what is it, and the team? I know you have hired some of our students as well. So what's FundMiner? How does it work, and how they can use it at some point?
Yes, absolutely. So. Okay, so I previously worked in the advancement office, and all universities and large nonprofits have a fundraising function, right? And so your fundraisers and fundraising team is raising money for all of the initiatives that the organization supports. So think scholarships, fellowships, sending you all to conferences, hosting events like this. Oftentimes there are donors who are supporting all of those initiatives. And so while I worked in the UTEP advancement office, I was in charge of their fund management function and all of the advancement operations, which is basically the systems and processes related to accepting the donations and using the donations. And so I worked really closely with the Office of Scholarships, with the Provost Office, with Business Affairs, to make sure that all of the money we were raising across campus is being used on the right things at the right time. And it turns out that large fundraising organizations, UTEP, other UT system schools, University of California schools all over the US and the globe really struggle with managing these funds at scale because there can be thousands of funds over time. Some of them exist forever in perpetuity. They can just get really complicated because every fund has different criteria and restrictions. And so while I was working here, I realized that it was really hard on everybody. And so we had people like deans who were, trying to look up information in different systems, and they're really busy people. And we're talking about hundreds of people and thousands of funds, and just processes that have to happen on a recurring annual basis. And so I realized that if we had technology that could sit at the center of all of these people, all of these processes, these different systems, that we could, one, make everybody's lives easier, but two, we could better make sure that we were actually using all of the money at the right time and to the highest and best use. And so just really maximizing the usage. And for me, that was important, especially as a person who put myself through school and worked really hard to do that, to see that our donor money was being used in the best way possible, and that if we could award any additional students, we were awarding more students. And so that's how FundMiner was born.
Great, excellent. It's interesting to see that you started as an entrepreneur, right? So what we say as an entrepreneur is someone that sees the problem internally and tries to find a solution. So you were able to take that from the university and do it externally. So when was that aha moment where you said, this is an opportunity for me, I can take this and run with it? And what was that experience?
So it's interesting that you asked that, because there's sort of more than one time that comes to mind. And this is something as an entrepreneur you sort of have to get used to. And honestly, looking back, I wish I pushed harder earlier. But at first, I just developed this internally to solve for our challenge. So I genuinely just wanted to make sure we could award as many scholarships as possible, use as much of our money as possible. It was only after a couple of years I realized I was actually really passionate about developing this tool and solving this problem and learning how we could make it better and better and better. And I'd studied entrepreneurship. That was really my passion. And so after building the tool internally and seeing that it made a big difference and made a lot of things possible that weren't before, I knew we would be, the tool would be applicable to at least the other organizations I'd talked to at the time, which were a handful. And I hypothesized or believed that there were other organizations having the same challenge. And the first time I brought up the idea of commercializing it, it was taken to someone in a leadership role who's not here anymore at UTEP. And he basically said, no, people try and do that all the time. These systems exist all the time. There's nothing there. And so it was kind of shooed away. And I was I really believe that there's something, but I guess he's right, fine. And it was only years later where I was but I actually believe this more and more and more, and have learned that more organizations need it. And it was really only when I was able to take it to a different group of people who did offer me the support that I needed to make it happen, that I was able to make it happen. And so I share that story because I probably could have done this 2 years or 3 years earlier than I did, and actually that would have given us an even bigger advantage in the market. But I was told no, or that it wasn't a good idea, and unfortunately I kind of listened to that and let it affect or influence my path. And I'm so grateful that I was able to circle back and still get the support from different people to do that. And fortunately my boss at the time, Jake, who's the VP for advancement, and Dr. Wilson were super supportive of it, and that really helped it be possible, or made it possible, because otherwise last time I brought it up, it was just kind of shut down. And so I think that was a big learning experience for me over time, and just throughout entrepreneurship over and over again is you have to learn to take signals when you're hearing a lot of the same things, but hearing a no from one or two people, it doesn't mean that much.
So what's your, let's say your suggestion or maybe a guidance to students, students and professionals here in the room that, to continue to overcome that no. And you said that earlier, so I wish I would have done it before. So Chelsea, from now in the past, what would be that, guidance as to keep pushing?
Yes, I think I've learned to just ask more questions and talk to more people. I mean, in that point, I asked one person and stopped there. And that was probably where my mistake was not collecting more data and information and talking to more people. And now I tend to talk to more people when I'm trying to learn about something, or I tend to get a little bit more curious and try to approach things from different angles. But I think at the end of the day, it's just being really confident and believing in what you're pursuing. And there are times where I collect information and it's like, okay, well, that wasn't a good idea. So let's, pivot to something else. So I think just, trying until you've collected enough information that you feel confident in that. Because in that moment when I was told no, I didn't feel confident. I did feel like that was my sign, is if I had followed my gut and intuition, I would have kept asking, and I didn't. I just kind of was like, well, that guy's, been there forever. He knows. He's in that
He's
position.
older than me, so he should know better.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So
but he was wrong.
Exactly. Right. So following your gut, it's sometimes you're questioning yourself, right? So interesting to see where that has taken you, and why it's important to listen to ourselves and what we like to do. So now, reflecting back on your time here as a college student, and looking at your pathway of becoming a founder, what are some specific pivotal moments or challenges that shape your path? And is there any way to kind of see them along when you're there?
Gosh, well, I brought up a couple of them where it was, I got this opportunity to travel to UT system that, felt really special. I think there's something about paying for your education too that makes you sort of appreciate it or feel differently about it. Other pivotal moments I think about are throughout my college program, there were a couple of times where I hit roadblocks, and it was only because I, again, pushed or asked that I was able to overcome those. And so one of them was UTEP had a new entrepreneurship program, and I had signed up for that program and was on track to graduate at a certain point in time, and there weren't the classes I needed available to do it and get that concentration. And so, instead of changing my major or something, I wrote to the department chair and, said, this is what I'm trying to do, this is my challenge. And he actually worked with me, and I was able to, I don't recall at this point, but I either did some virtual class or he worked with me on the side. We worked on something so that I was still able to accomplish it. Same with the MBA program. I had a need to start in the spring instead of the fall, and they had a cohort program, and so I was gonna be off cycle. And I went and talked to them and explained my situation, and they worked with me. And so there's a lot of these instances where I think kind of pushing and asking and getting curious and exploring, there's a lot of instances where if I just didn't, it would have really changed my trajectory or what I was able to accomplish, like small things. And so I think that when I think about that, there are a lot of other times in my life where there were similar things. It was like I went to that event and made an amazing connection that led to something, or I stayed up later to apply to that one accelerator program, and then ended up getting in, and that and things like that. And so I guess in all of that, the lesson for me feels like it's like do the thing, whether it's if you're thinking about applying to something, like you make sure you're just doing it, even if it's a little hard to get it done in that time, or if you feel like there's a roadblock, instead of just accepting the roadblock, like, is there anyone you can call? I'll give you an example with one of our salespeople. She told me, like, oh, I don't have this, I can't find the phone number for this person. And I said, well, why don't you call the advancement office's front desk? And it was yeah, it was, of course you can call the front desk and ask for their contact, but she kind of like stopped at, like, well, I can't find their phone number. And so I always am trying to think of, like, well, what else can we do to get there? And oftentimes there's something there.
Right. Just, the growth mindset, right? The growth mindset, and not settling for a no, just being creative.
Right.
And how do you find, your answers? That's part of the things we're trying to also teach our students, right? How do you use a growth mindset and being creative? So that's important entrepreneurship skills that you'll never know they're actual skills until you put them into work, right?
Yeah.
So now let's dive more into why staying in El Paso, right? Everyone because you're a very successful founder, and majority is like, I'm just gonna go away. One, because of the resources, the opportunity, the money, you name it. I would like to hear from you. Why did you decide to stay in El Paso and still contributing to the university?
Well, a couple of different reasons. I mean, I love the culture here. I love the relationships I've built here. It's special for me to feel like I'm in a small town with it actually being a big town, and so you can go to other cities and it's just not the same. And so I appreciate here, like, having a great network and being able to, if I need to find this kind of person, I can call someone who knows someone. So for me, the relationships, the network, the culture, the environment, I love, the mountains and to hike. There's also a sense of like loyalty and to giving back to the community that I felt like gave me opportunity. Gosh, I could go on. The cost of living here is so much better. I mean, especially when you're starting off in a new company, you're oftentimes taking a lower salary than you would make in the market. And so it's helpful to be somewhere that's more affordable at the same time. There's great talent here. We've hired some students out of UTEP, some graduates out of UTEP, and they're some of the best that we work with. And
Yay.
So, yes. And so I am really bullish on this, this market. I think that the people here have all of the same potential, if not more.
Right.
At the end of the day, I don't think it comes down to, where you went to school, or what you studied. That's your success indicator. I think it's like your relentless pursuit of your goals, and taking like radical ownership over your responsibilities and goals. And so El Paso is has a very big place in my heart, and I believe in giving back. I mean, my whole technology company is about tech for good and giving back and making sure that we are, supporting social initiatives. And so I like being tied to El Paso, and it's easy to travel from here. And with the remote world today, it doesn't feel like we're missing out on anything either.
Yeah, that's great. The benefits of COVID,
Yeah.
right? Just understanding that you can do anything from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
That's great. So before continuing with their questions, I would like to open the floor for any questions that you may have for Chelsea. Yes, go ahead.
Can you touch on like your experience raising money from investors and like the lessons that you learned through those experiences?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a weird thing because you're basically like, convincing someone to support your idea, and they're just trying to like find holes in it. And so, it can feel a little disheartening at times because you're kind of coming to someone excited, like, this is everything I'm doing, and their job is to pick it apart and say like, well, why do you think this? And why do you think this? And so I think the biggest lesson there or piece of advice I would have is making sure that you're taking every question and piece of feedback and making sure you have a good answer for it and iterating on your plan and product to make sure you have a good answer for those questions. So I try to think of it that way when they're asking these different things. It's like, okay, that's something I need a solid answer for. And so then, getting curious, picking that apart, brainstorming that to make sure that I have a good answer for that. Yeah, that's what I would say. That kind of goes how that goes.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions in the room?
I know you mentioned you have a co-founder as well. I wanted to ask, like, what's the process of like why you believed in them so much to be like the perfect partner for you?
Great question. It's tough. At some point, you are really putting a lot of trust in someone, and I think with Alejandro specifically, we had I knew him personally before he was my co-founder, and so that helps a little bit with that like building of trust. It also didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process. So it took us, I want to say, 6 or 7 months to really get that solidified. And like during that whole process, you're kind of testing out the relationship, getting to know each other, making sure that they're gonna uphold their end of the deal, because at the end of the day, like you need each other, and you need each other to uphold each of your end of the deal. So I don't know that there's a magic formula necessarily, but I think trust is a really big part of that. And for me, I realized very quickly or over time in this period of time that he was someone I could trust at the end of the day to deliver. And that's someone that I trusted as a person to not let me down. And yeah, I think it kind of comes down to trust. And then there's of course like complementary skills. There's sort of all of the things technical. There's the running of the company. There's all of the sales. And so it's just kind of finding the right skill set for that to fill in for your gaps.
Anybody else? Yes.
So I know there's a lot of benefits related to having a business partner, but I'm assuming there's also challenges. What are those for you especially, and how do you address them, or how do you navigate them?
Great question as well. I think it comes down to having hard conversations when needed. And that's something that over my career I've had to kind of learn over and over and over again. And I'm fortunate to have had some great bosses who really instilled that in me, where if I wanted to complain about someone, they would encourage me to go and talk to the person about the challenge. And so I think the challenges can be related to, it can be really overwhelming at times. I mean, you have very limited resources, very limited bandwidth. You're trying to, build a mountain in a day, and it can just be like high pressure, high stress, very fast paced. And so they're kind of going back to the trust component. I think that we are also really good at keeping in mind that if one of us gets on each other's nerves or something, it's in the heat of all of these things. And at the end of the day, we're there for a common mission. We trust each other. We've got each other's backs. And if you can kind of come back to the values, I think that will always be the guiding light, because there's just times where you will act out of character or be in a bad mood or not do your part because you forgot or whatever it is. So I think getting really clear on your values as a team, like for us, it's easy to make certain decisions because this is oversimplifying it, but I think both of us believe in being good people generally. And so a lot of decisions kind of come down to a simple value like that.
Interesting. Great. It's, kind of like going back to basics, right? What are your values? Having conversations is just, they're so important and basic, but sometimes we forget how important they are when, in this case, solving conflicts. Anybody else in the audience? So I would like to ask,
I have one.
Yes,
right?
go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
At what point did you feel that you achieved a breakthrough through your company?
Oh my gosh, still looking for it. still searching for the breakthrough.
Excellent question.
Yes, there's always the next thing, is what I would say. And so, they talk about startups like it's a roller coaster. I'm sure everybody's heard that term. And so it almost feels like mini breakthroughs versus like one big thing. And so, when we launched our product, that was a breakthrough. When we, got our first paying customer onboarded, that was a breakthrough. I think hiring a sales team felt like a big deal. Exhibiting at our first conference. So I kind of think about it more in like micro wins and kind of that next step or next achievable iteration that's a little bit bigger and grander versus like identifying kind of one big one.
Thank you. Going back to what they were asking on, how we failed to raise capital, and then reflectioning on your journey. When do you know that it's time to go out and ask for money, right? When do you say, I'm ready for the next step, when you're still building something?
Yeah, also great question. I think this goes back to having a good plan in place. And so if you have projections and a goal, like you're going to be sort of forced into something. And so raising money is not always the answer. It's what we had to do, and it was our only path at the time, given our unique dynamic. But every business is super unique, and you can build a huge company without raising any money at all. You can also raise a ton of money and end up with nothing or losing a bunch of money for people. So there's so many different scenarios and outcomes and unique mixes of the fit. And so I think it's kind of starting with like, what can you do for how long, with who, what are your goals, working backward from that. I always think having a strong budget and projections into the future is important, because if you realize like, I did several months with no pay, for example, and I knew there were only a certain amount of months I was going to survive with that. And so there just ends up being a certain path that you can take with the resources you have and the goals you're trying to accomplish. So I think it's making sure you can kind of triangulate all of that.
Right, just having guidance and like your internal Google Maps.
Right.
Like business Google Maps. So can you talk about the impact of networking, getting where you are right now, and how can we leverage, as a student, as professionals, the network, and why it's important to develop one?
Gosh, I think the network is super important. And, I I like to think of this study, the six degrees of separation, and there was, some scientists back in the day who wanted to see how many connections it would take for one person to randomly send a package to another specific person. And so they had a log on the package, and it was trying to make it to, you could only send the package to someone you knew, and it was trying to make it from the West Coast to Boston, something along that sort. And so they had to say we're trying to make the package to this, stockbroker in Boston. And so if I get this, I might think well, I know one person in Boston, so I'll just send it to them. And so it took only 6 sends to make it to that exact person who had absolutely no connection to the first person. And so if you think about the fact that you're 6 introductions away from anyone you want to meet, that's pretty powerful. And I always ask for introductions. I always take the meetings. There are pros and cons to that. I will say that I have found myself in many situations where I'm why am I here? This is a waste of time. Not like this one, of course, but that happens. But there's also been so many times where I reach out, have a random meeting, and then I'm oh my God, that was the most amazing conversation that led to this amazing opportunity. And so I try to say yes and to as many things as I can that make sense, and do the things and meet with the people, and just sort of have faith that you're paying it forward almost, and that connection will lead to something down the line, and that it sort of all comes back. So I'm a huge believer in the network. That's how we secured all of our investors for our company. It was, do you know anyone? Okay, you introduced me here. I have that conversation. Then they thought of me, introduced me here. I just can't stress that enough, is the importance of building your network, and also making sure that the impressions that you're leaving on people are positive impressions, because that's all related to your network and the network that you're building.
Yeah, we were just talking about how important it is just to, even say yes to that meeting when you're what am I going to do here? But just having those clear outcomes or asks, right? It's important as well.
I tried to also be a giver requester, which is making sure I'm giving them value and asking for things at the same time. Right. And so I sometimes in conversations I'm I just want to see how we can support each other, and maybe I have no idea how I can possibly help this person, but throughout the conversation I might be able to think of some introduction I can make for them. So it's that give request relationship.
Excellent. I know we're almost coming up to time, so I would like to just give one more time for anyone in the audience to ask any questions. This is your golden opportunity.
Have one.
Go ahead.
How do you know it was time to jump? You had a secure job. I don't know, you're doing probably financially well working here. How do you know, okay, I have saved enough and I have prepped enough? How do you know how to take that step?
It was very scary. I started working when I was 16, and always had a secure job and made sure that I was always okay. And if I had to, I worked 2 jobs to make sure that I was okay. And so when it came to taking the leap, I knew I had to, because I think it's really hard to start a company if you're sort of half in, half out. You have to be all in all day. I mean, in the last, couple weeks alone, I find myself waking up at 4 in the morning and just starting, because I feel obsessed with the goal that I'm trying to achieve. And so going back, there were a couple things, I knew I needed to be full-time to really make it happen. And I really did see a shift in that when I dedicated myself full-time and jumped all in. But the second thing was, I knew I would do whatever it took to survive. And so I said, worst case scenario, I have some friends who have kids, and I'll call them and ask to babysit or something, or I know I can go to a restaurant and get a waiting job. Like worst case, I can wait tables, or babysit, or I don't know, clean the yard. I mean, I was like, I'll do anything if I have to. And so I think it was that willingness to just do whatever it takes to make it happen.
That's an excellent question. I feel like everyone at some point is like, am I ready? Am I not
It was
ready?
really scary.
Should I
though,
save a
for
little
sure.
bit more? But it's absolutely, I mean, I think everyone at some point is in that boat. So great. Thank you for sharing that wisdom. I know we have one more over here. You okay? Yes? Yeah? Another question?
I'm okay. If there's no more questions, I can ask one more.
Go ahead.
So, what advice would you give to how long you been with the running the company?
Only about 14 or 15 months at this
Okay.
point, so pretty new.
Yeah. So go back to the moment when you decide to start to jump on this. What advice would you give to that young person?
I think just believing in yourself. One thing that I think is really interesting, and I'm not a mother myself, but I always see mothers and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do they do it? It's such and then I see like working mothers too, and it's like I am super swamped all the time with just my work, and I don't even have a family I'm taking care of. And I remember asking a friend, like, how do you do it? And she said, I never thought I would be able to, but you just expand, like your capacity just expands. And I like to think of that story because while I don't think I'm expanding to that level of being a mom yet, I think it's really something really special about just being a human is that your capacity to just expand in these challenging situations. And so, for example, I used to be so afraid of public speaking. Like I would shake uncontrollably. I just was so, I remember literally being like one time like holding a cup and it was like going crazy, like spilling. So I used to just get so nervous. And it was really only like practice and being in all these uncomfortable situations that then I got more comfortable with it and learned like take a couple deep breaths before it really helps, and all these other things. So I think it's really like believing that you have the capacity to grow into that space. If you don't, like imposter syndrome is real. It's definitely a real thing. We all feel it at different points in time. But I think, realizing like everybody started somewhere, we all have the same capacity. It's really how hard you challenge yourself, how often you rise to the occasion, put yourself in these hard situations that just will become easier than the next time.
So we talked about mentorship, and then this is our kind of our last question before we close the session. Just to be mindful of everyone's time. We talk about mentorship. We talk about networking. What about mentorship and the role that has played in you personally and professionally?
Yeah, it's interesting because one, I have relied heavily on mentors. I like to talk through things with people. So I've been really fortunate to have great mentors, whether they wanted to mentor me or not. I was calling them and asking the questions. And also, I believe in paying it forward. Like mentorship has just been so important and helpful to me. And the thing that also comes to mind is there's often a lot of like tactical mentorship where it's like, well, I don't know, how do I do this thing? But I find myself almost more leaning on mentors for some of the soft skills and people things. And so if I'm, struggling with a personnel challenge or, not feeling great about a certain thing, I've learned that like mentors can also be really helpful in just the personal aspect and emotional aspect. And that's something that's really special in the entrepreneurship world is a lot of other entrepreneurs recognize that and will say like call me when you feel burnt out and I'm going to be here to talk to you when you feel burnt out. So I think there's the like tactical piece, and that's so helpful and great, but also having the types of mentors you can rely on for leadership support, emotional support, and just lifting lifting you up too.
Right. How do you identify your mentors? How do you say, I want that person to be mentor?
That's a good question. I have just kind of always leaned on people and asked for help, and so and then like certain relationships just developed more over time. So I think it's kind of a natural thing. There are also people I thought would be great mentors who it just didn't work, or we just didn't connect in that way. So I think it goes back to like meeting people, building your network, and then kind of letting those relationships naturally cultivate.
Wonderful. Thank you. So now we're talking about, all the different aspects of you as a student, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, female founder, right? Raising capital, importance of networking, mentorship, building, trust in yourself. If you will summarize, the Chelsea way of, this is what I would like the audience to take a piece of advice from you, what would that be?
Well, the three things that come to mind, which I think we've talked about all of them, are really, getting curious and asking the questions, kind of doing the thing, like taking it that next level, taking everything to that next level. Networking. So we talked a lot about networking and, finding mentors, building relationships, surrounding yourself with the right people who uplift you in the right ways and toward your goals. What was my third? I forgot the third one, but something around ownership, I would say.
Okay.
I think it's really easy to set yourself apart in a group by really owning your role in that group. And so if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you are in charge of a certain thing, you do that thing. So I don't have like a good.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. I think we've had, a wonderful conversation with, again, it's kind of difficult to put in perspective, just, three items when everything is so important. So how can they reach out to you? How can they connect with you? Where they can find Chelsea?
LinkedIn is a good way. I would say LinkedIn is a really easy way. I typically am pretty responsive.
Okay, yeah, I agree. So thank you all so much for coming in here today. So grateful for your time. Thank you, Chelsea, for donating your time, especially when you're just up and down running, getting to run your business. This is one of the many activities and workshops that we offer at the Microlia Center for Innovation and Commerce, because we would like for you to be here in Chelsea's spot, right? So we want students, we want faculty, we want staff to be able to share that story that we all need. We all need to show we're UTEP Super Power. So stay tuned for more events like this. We hope to see you next time as well. Thank you for being here, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all.